For D-BT04, there were 3 things I was really excited about. 1 was obviously the new Barrel Maga support. 2 was the new Magnolia support. Then there was the Hexaorb support that I was really psyched about. But I don't know how I feel about it right now. So, Hexaorb Sorceress is the main grade 3 Vanguard for this deck. She has 2 abilities. When your drive check reveals a trigger unit, choose one of your rear guards, they get 10,000 power. You cannot give Hexaorb Sorceress this 10,000 power buff. And I'm 99% sure that your drive check means whenever another card drive checks as well. So not only Hexaorb Sorceress as your Vanguard, but if you, for example, use your overtrigger and have another unit drive check, it should work as well. Then she has another ability where if you Persona Ride over her, you can counterblast Soul Blast 1 and then place a trigger or front unit, trigger unit from your hand on top of your deck. Then she will get +1 drive for the end of that turn. So that means that you're more than likely going to check, obviously, whatever trigger you put on top, which will obviously activate her first effect, but also you get more drive checks, which is really good. In general, this deck is supposed to sort of be, like I've mentioned before, the spiritual successor to like Oracle Think Tank and things of the like, where you're supposed to manipulate the top couple of cards of your deck in order to make sure you get the triggers that you want or the cards that you want, send everything else to the bottom. But in set 4, she kind of strays from this quite a bit because she got some pretty interesting support that allowed her to be able to multi-attack, which is really good at face value because you get these really big, columns or really big rear guards thanks to both the fact that you're checking triggers constantly and that you are, getting an additional 10,000 power from that. Then also to be able to stand them is really good. However, this deck continues to suffer from a problem of not being able to get any good resources. Whereas Stokea became like this huge resource generating monster, Hexaorb Sorceress and I guess most of Keter Sanctuary kind of just doesn't really have that. But there is a sort of way to get around that and actually make this deck pretty playable now with the new support, but it kind of changes the game plan altogether. So let's go over that really quickly before I go into the rest of the cards. So originally your plan was mainly focusing on Hexaorb Sorceress and her grade 2s in order to manipulate the top cards of your deck. Instead, we're focusing on Ragriel. Now that's what we're doing here. You want to use Ragriel in combination with cards like Nanaful, Lalarita, and the overDress Sorceress to basically get 3 Vanguards attack in 1 turn. So what you do is you take your Ragriel, you rest 4 of your units here, and also counterblast 2 whenever Ragriel attacks. Then this unit gets +5 and it can also drive check for that turn. When you drive check a trigger, you activate all of the abilities of the following cards down here. When you drive check a trigger, you can go ahead and retire your overDress Sorceress here to either give you countercharge or soul charge 1. Usually it's always countercharge because we don't really have any other way to countercharge in this deck. You can also then use your Lalarita, which is the new triple rare for this deck that just came out in set 4, where you can counterblast Soul Blast 1 and actually stand one of your other rear guards whenever you drive check a trigger. So that being said, you can go ahead and stand your Ragriel. Once you drive check with them, you might get some crits using, something like the Kakarone or the Olwen to manipulate your stack. You can put those triggers on him, including, the buff from Hexaorb Sorceress to make this a really threatening threat. And then finally, you can also use the Nanaful here to actually get back the soul that you lost for Lalarita, because Nanaful, what she does is that she lets you, whenever you drive check a trigger, you can put a card from your hand into the soul to draw a card, which sounds kind of expensive considering that you are, minusing constantly, you're losing 2 units and resources and everything, but they kind of all refund their costs. Nanaful gives you the soul, overDress gives you the counter charge, and Lalarita is just your enabler here. But Ragriel lets you draw 2 essentially because you are drive checking, so you get this really interesting loop here. Then after that, you can still attack with your Hexaorb Sorceress, so you get another Vanguard attack here, which then your opponent is put in this sort of awkward situation where they have to decide, okay, this unit probably got a bunch of power, maybe some crits. Do I want to guard this attack that will add on more crits, or do I spend my resources to guard this attack, or both? Which is really good. And also, you're not really restricted on, you know, being turn 4. You can do this if you have all the pieces from turn 3 as soon as you ride your Vanguard. So let's go back over and go over the ride deck here. We're going to start here with actually the Knight of Heavenly Bow base. You don't have to play this, you can play any of your other optional starters. The reason we're playing this one is to kind of just trick people into thinking we're playing Bastion. You can technically play the Bastion line, I'll talk about that in a second, but our grade 1 is actually going to be the Blaster Javelin. So, Blaster Javelin, whenever you ride over him with Blaster Dark, you can reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a unit, put it as rest on your field. If not, then you can go ahead and discard that. We don't play any orders, so it's always going to be a unit. And then Blaster Dark, while its effect doesn't really matter here, but you can, on Rearguard Circle or Vanguard Circle, you can counterblast one, retire another rearguard, retire one of your opponent's rearguards, and then this unit will get drive +1 during your turn, or to the end of that turn, which is nice. Usually gets +5 for something getting retired. So, you can technically use this with the rest of the deck that, you know, adds on to the whole drive checking, a trigger, getting stuff happening. But essentially what I'm doing with these two is making sure that I have enough rear guards so that when it comes to my big lag reel turn here, I have enough rear guards to actually be able to rest and not have to discard my whole hand. While I add, you know, about 4 cards from both Lagriel and Hexaorb Sorceress as an attack, having to then discard those 4 cards is kind of tough, especially since I have to play a full field in order to, you know, make this happen. You can, for example, instead of using this, use the Bastion line, which the grade 1, if you ride over with the grade 2, it lets you reveal 2 of your grade 2s, or sorry, 2 of your grade 3s, and then do basically the same exact thing. But that way you have to kind of like reveal stuff to your opponent. So I feel like this is the most optimal way. Other than that, you could of course use the Hexaorb Sorceress ride line, but I feel like that doesn't really give you too much, right? You have to counterblast 1 for the grade 1. You really have barely any resources, so I don't really want to be counterblasting, which is why I never really use this effect unless I get rushed or something like that. Then the grade 2 is still really good. Once you ride Hexaorb Sorceress over her, you can look at the top 3 and arrange it, which is nice, but I honestly would rather just not even worry about that and just get the extra body on field, which means, you know, I can maybe automatically get a Lagriel, get something that I can just get on the field, so that I can later on rest it for Lagriel and get, you know, multiple Vanguard attacks in that turn. Then for the triggers, it's pretty much what you'd expect for of the new effect crits, so that we can, if by chance we use it as a booster, we can put it into Stow, which gives us some resource. And then actually 3 of the older crits, we want to run a lot of crits because we're getting a lot of Vanguard attacks, so we want to be as lethal as possible. On top of that, we are playing here 4 of the new draw trigger. You could do 3 instead. You do draw a lot, ironically, from, you know, the Vanguard's attacks and Nanofall and whatnot. But this is just to make sure that you actually get all the pieces you need, so that on your turn 3 turn, or as soon as you possibly can, you have, you know, you're able to actually enable all of your combos. There's really no point in playing fronts, since you're going to be resting pretty much your whole board there. Fronts aren't really that great. You can still play them if you want instead of the draw. That does give both Hexaorb Sorceress and your Lagriel more power, but I would rather just draw a couple more cards to make sure I can even get to that. Then of course we do have our 4 heals here, as well as the 4 PGs, because again, would rather not lose, so got to play those. And finally we have our over trigger in the Keter Sanctuary over trigger, who I'm not even going to bother saying the name of. So this card is kind of interesting, because before this was amazing for Hexaorb Sorceress, because once you check it, you can attend the other turn, all of your rear guards, they get drive checks, right? However, since you're only really using Lagriel mainly as your main offense, and Hexaorb, you're really only getting those 3 attacks in 1 turn, this is almost not as useful, and you might even be better off playing the Cray Elemental one, because there is a situation where if you check this with, let's say, Lagriel, you can then give Lagriel 100 million power, and then give your Hexaorb Sorceress 100 million power, which means if you do manage to stand Lagriel, that's going to be one attack, the attack he's making that has 100 million power, then Hexaorb Sorceress 100 million power, then Lagriel, who was stood up by Laurita, is another 100 million power attack. So arguably that might be better. On the off chance that you don't have that set up, this is obviously the better option. So I haven't experimented with the other one, but I do think that is pretty viable. The grade 1s here are pretty simple. We're just going to be playing 4 copies of the recurring magic Laurita. She's the triple rare that we got from set 4. At the end of the battle that your drive check revealed a trigger unit. If your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, Counterblast, Soul Blast 1, and choose one of your other Vanguards, or rear guards, not herself, stand it and then retire this unit. Unfortunately, she does have to retire herself, so you can't use it multiple times, and Counterblast, Soul Blast 1 is kind of heavy, but again, I showed you the loop where you can kind of refund that cost. This is definitely one of your main units, your main combo pieces that you really want to use. I was originally hoping to use this with like the Olwen, get him really big, but that's actually more expensive to like use Olwen, use his Counterblast plus Hexaorb Sorcerer's effect in order to get him, you know, decently big. I feel like using the Lagriel is a little bit more threatening, especially because just the drive checks are just way too good, right? We're going to be playing 4 copies of Kakarone here, Magic of Objective Kakarone. I still hate Kakarone, to be honest with you. I honestly really only play her if 1, I don't have Olwen, and 2, as just a 10k shield. Honestly, that's all I have her for, but when she splits on Rearguard Circle, if you have Hexaorb Sorceress or Pentagleam Sorceress as your Vanguard, you can Soul Blast, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and put them on top of your deck in any order, which is great. The only problem with this is with this and Olwen, if you get it from Blaster Javelin's skill, you kind of waste it because you can't do it at all. But changing the top cards of your deck is really not the main focus of this deck, or this build, I should say. I wanted to replace her with the new common, but the problem with the new common is that you have to attack in order to use the effect, and I'm most likely not going to be able to attack with my other rear guard that's, you know, in front. It's just going to be Lagriel and then Hexaorb Sorceress and then back to Lagriel, right? Then we've got ourselves 4 of the Olwen. Olwen is great on place if you have Hexaorb Sorceress. So blast, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 of them, put them on top of your deck in any order, and put the rest in your in the bottom of your deck in any order. So if you check and it's just 2 things that you don't want to check, you know, drive check, you can go ahead and put them at the bottom of your deck. That's what makes Olwen so good. Whereas, you know, Kakarone just lets you look at top 2 for Soul Blast and then put them right back on the top of your deck in any order. If I don't have triggers or if it's just a bunch of garbage, I just change the order in which I get that garbage, right? And it's not like I really have any ways to like draw before that or anything like that, so that's what makes Olwen really good. He also has a second effect where if you really trigger a unit, you can counterblast 1 and give him 10,000 power. This gets really good, really big with Hexaorb Sorcerer's effect, because you can basically have a unit that gets plus 30, because you'll get plus 10 from his own ability, plus 10 from Hexaorb Sorceress, and then another plus 10 from the actual trigger. So if there's ever a situation where you don't have Lagriel, you can always fall back on this and go into like, you know, the usual Hexaorb Sorceress plan, which is just this, and then just get in pretty big and swing in, check some triggers, maybe get an OT, make your opponent cry. That's just how it be. Then the last grade 2 here is actually going to be from set 3, the Magic of Appreciation Nanifold. I might actually cut this down to 3. I don't actually use this as much, but I don't really have anything else to replace her with. But what she does is when your drive check reveals a trigger, put a card from your hand into the soul and draw a card. This is really good because it lets you tutor out one of your cards. It fills up your soul, which you use practically every turn, right? And since you're drive checking twice, you do have, you know, several cards in hand plus all the draw triggers, so it's not really that big of a cost. And for the most part, you kind of just sit her in the back row and just let her go ahead and activate as part of the combo. Then for the grade 3s, we're going to be playing 3 of the Octo Devote Sorceress. I always say Octo Deviate. Octo Devote Sorceress. This is our only form of countercharge in this deck. You could maybe put in the oh no! Shoot, what is his name now? The Fasado, there we go. You can put him in, but he kind of clashes with this deck. While the resist and being able to get both your resources in is nice. He not only has to attack and actually hit, but he's not going to be able to attack because we're just probably going to be resting everything anyways. So he's just going to kind of sit there, right? He will be at best a backup plan. Whereas the Sorceress here, whenever you drive check a trigger in your Vanguard or Hexaorb Sorceress, you can retire this unit, unfortunately, countercharge or short charge once. I really wish this was just put her into the soul instead of retiring her. I don't understand why. So Kea gets a card that does the same thing, and it's a grade 2, which makes it even better, but in any case, you just use this to try and get your counterblast back. Ideally, you're trying to end the game in a couple of turns, so, you know, only being able to countercharge once is not the worst thing, because you're gonna probably get smacked a bunch of times and then, you know, try and hit back on the clapback. But I'll probably, like I said, get rid of one Nautical, play an extra Sorceress just to have it. But sometimes, you know, if you have too many, there's not really too much you can do with them, because you kind of need some of the other pieces as well, and Nautical is maybe able to search that out for you. We're of course going to be playing 3 copies of Hexaorb Sorceress in the main deck. You don't often go for her Persona Ride skill, you just use the Persona Ride for the power. The reason you don't really go for the Persona Ride skill is that it does cost a lot, and you'd rather use that for like La Larita or to be able to actually get Lagro to counterblast, right? But if you can pull that off and everything else, you might as well do it, and it'll pretty much end you the game there. Because that is 2 Vanguards attack, one of them with triple drive. That's a lot. That's a lot of potential triggers coming at your opponent's face, each of them getting plus 10 power, right? So that is really good. Last card in our deck here is going to be 4 copies of Heavenly Shock of Distinction Lagriel. So this is how Lagriel works. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, counterblast 2, rest any number of other rearguards to the end of that battle, or for the end of that battle, he gets drive check and 5k attack. So let's go over the cost really quickly, because this part was really confusing for me. At the end of that battle, if you rested 3 of your units, you have to discard 3 cards. If you rested 2 of your units, you have to discard 3 cards. If you rested 1 of your units, you have to discard 5 cards, because it's a 3 and then the second part of the skill. Same thing, if you rest 0, you have to go ahead and discard 5 cards. So that means that you can technically use this as like your last ditch effort. If it's like your final turn and you don't want to rest anything, you can go ahead and try and use this and, you know, have the extra swing on the other side. But ideally what you want to do with this is rest 4 units, which means you don't have to discard anything, and you get to keep all those cards in hand and actually use them to card next turn. The drive checks are also really good, because if you can get a crit on him and stand him, plus Hexaorb Sorceress's boost, he is pretty threatening. Alright, that does it for the main deck. Usually here I like to go over some of the additional options you can play. I'll be honest with you, there's not really much. So we have here this very interesting card, Heavenly Incantation Above the Clouds, Balgar. You can use him as a Ragriel Searcher on place on Rearguard Circle. If you have 4 or less cards in your hand, counterblast, look at the top 5 and play a grade 3 from among them. But he does shuffle your deck. So if for some reason you only have 3 Ragriels, I guess this can be your 4th. But yep. Does also get a body out on the field. Then we have this card that I was really excited for. I was really hoping to make this the main theme of the deck. This is Twinned Great Magic Totorohene. At the end of the battle, that your unit attack, counterblast 1, and perform all of the following according to the triggers units revealed in that battle's drive check. So if you check a critical trigger, you can take one of your opponent's rear guards, put them at the bottom of your deck. But if you checked a front trigger, you can choose one of your grade 2 or less rear guards and sand it. So I was hoping to really get a lot of good multi-attack with this, but unfortunately the counterblast is kind of damaging. I thought she would be better than La Larita, but she's only for grade 2 units, so you'd probably have to use this with Olwen. There might still be a way to use that, but I feel like the Lagro version is just more potent. We did have to cut the Magic Revelation Tortoise. Aside from the fact that she shuffles our deck, we still don't like that. But we don't really care too much of getting our Persona Ride. You know, it is nice, but we just have other things that we can do, right? And then the Counterblast sure as heck does not help us. I did cut the Drilling Angel, but ironically, you can maybe play it now. While shuffling your deck does suck, it doesn't matter as much as before, and this does have the chance to actually get your unit on board. In addition to that, it actually adds to your soul from your drop, so you're not minusing in any way. So I think the Drilling Angel is pretty cool. It also lets you be maybe even more aggressive early on. Plus, in this specific list, I'm playing a lot of 4-ofs, so there's a good chance that you'll actually hit and actually be able to call the card from this. And finally, the last card here is the Erase Rod Angel. If For example, you did want to go with the Bastion Ride line, you can put a grade 3 in to help your chances to get that to work out. So you can actually call the card. She's also decent in that she's slightly better than Kakarone. You still blast for 1, look at the top card of your deck. If it's a unit, you can either call it, so you do, get to call out a card in the same column as this unit, unfortunately, but it doesn't really matter for this deck because you're probably going to end up resting it anyways, and if not, you just leave it on top of your deck. So you still look at the top card of your deck anyways, but it's only 1 card, and it might not be as useful to call it out. It's up to you, but it is a grade 3. I don't know if you really want to have any more grade 3 since we're already playing, I think, like 11. And then that's it. That is the deck. That's how I've been playing Hexaorb Sorceress in set 4. It is pretty fun, especially when you actually get to pull it off, and I have been able to pull it off quite a lot. One of the biggest problems has been if I don't somehow finish my opponent in those 1 or 2 turns that I do it. Not only do I run out of resources, but I also run out of triggers, and without any triggers, I can't really do anything, so that kind of messes me up if the game gets really long. But kind of the purpose of this deck is to just finish out the game more or less as quickly as possible. And obviously, if you face off something more control heavy, so like Gravidia or the usual examples, you're probably gonna have a rough time because you want to have more or less a full board in play. But some of the more things like maybe Prison or something like that, since they have to go into their Pure Light, you might be able to put some pressure on them. Anything that has to wait for turn 4, you might be able to pressure them a little bit. And you do draw a bunch, so you might be able to even withstand their big turn 4 attack and maybe clap back. But it's definitely not something Omega in your favor. But in any case, let me know what you think about this list in the comments down below. Oh, okay. Wow. What? Is that just the light? Do you guys see what's going on here? Wow, that's interesting. I thought there was like some of my dog's hair in my sleeves. Anyways, yeah. Let me know what you guys thought about this list in the comments down below. And let me know if you enjoyed this video. If not, let me know that as well, I guess. And until next time, take care of yourself.